this Saturday on our special is his name is not Brian Lipton Zumi. It's Brian Scott Lipton, who has been writing about the theater for a couple of decades now. I've been so lazy this week, I don't even have his credentials. We're going to literally ask him where he's writing for now. As soon as he pops on, I've admitted him into the neighborhood. So while we're waiting, I'll remind you that you can watch our archives at davesgoneby.com. DAVESGONEBY, davesgoneby.com. Our very first episode is there. Our dozens of episodes, hundreds of episodes are there as well. You can watch them at any time. But now we are watching Brian Scott Lipton. Good morning, Brian. I need you to unmute your... There we go. How you doing, Brian?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me, Dave.
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, you kind of gave me the idea to even do a special again this year.
Good.
Wasn't even going to do it. Now, here we are. How you been? First of all, how are you? How was your year?
It was a year. It was a year.
Okay, you're feeling well? Things are decent?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
Good. So,
it was a busy year.
Where are you writing for these days?
I am the chief theater critic for citytour.com. That is my main writing source. I do some profiles for theatermania.com, where I was editor-in-chief. Occasionally, you'll see me on theaterpizzazz.com. I do celebrity interviews for Connecticut Voice. And I vote for pretty much every theater award ever known to man, so including 2 new ones this year. So,
what are a couple of the recent celebs that you've interviewed for Connecticut Voice?
Well, that's not always that's actually not always theater. So
okay, well, I'm just curious if people want to read your writing, like who. Yeah,
I just my current issue has an interview with Chasten Buttigieg, Pete Buttigieg's husband, who has the memoir out. He was a wonderful interview. So I urge people to read that if you go to Connecticut Voice.
Sure.
Theater Mania, I did Elizabeth McGovern recently for a play she did in LA, and that was really fun. It's always fun. I mean, what I love about the interviewing is I get to talk to people who are really old friends who I've known. I've done this business for 35 years. And sometimes I get to meet people I've never met before but really admire. And that's the best part, other than actually going to the theater, which is what I do, 100-something nights a year.
So let me ask you, Brian Scott Lipton, even apart from the categories and the nominees themselves, what are a couple of the shows this year, on or even off Broadway, that you went, wow, this is the best of the year?
Sure. And although they are nominated, and some not. So musically, I was really blown away by the new revival of Parade, which I was lucky enough to see first at City Center as part of Encore, and now currently on Broadway at the Jacobs Theater. And I think this has just been a spectacular reinvention by director Michael Arden and the entire company of Jason Robert Brown's 1999 musical, which I saw the first time at Lincoln Center, about the lynching of Leo Frank in Atlanta in 1913, who was a Jew unjustly accused of killing a young non-Jewish woman. It's incredibly timely, of course, first of all, but it's an extraordinary cast led by Ben Platt and Michaela Diamond, and you really just feel what happened in that time period, and you're almost a little scared in the sense that it's not too far from what could happen here. So
you felt that even more in the revival than you did whatever it was, 15, 20 years?
Oh, yeah, I think we were in a different climate. Maybe we weren't as aware or concerned of anti-Semitism back then. And I just think Michael staged it so smartly. Very simply, it's a very simple set, basically, really allowing us to focus on the story and the characters. And so that definitely was at the top of the year. And I guess, on the equitable side of the equation, the play category also dealing with anti-Semitism was Tom Stoppard's Leopoldstadt, which is still on view till July 2nd at the Longacre Theater, which traces about a little less than 100 years in the life of the Vienna Jewish family, through very happy times when there was the belief that Vienna in Austria was going to be the center of the world, Jews and non-Jews alike through the Holocaust, obviously, and the aftermath of the Holocaust, and trying to live with the guilt. And as you may know, it's based on Mr. Stoppard's actual own life, who was unaware. Actually, he changed the time period. I mean, this play only ends in the 50s, but he was unaware that he was Jewish till the 1990s.
Wow, I did not realize that.
Yes, making it short, and the play covers this with a character that's called Leo, who is the standard for Mr. Stoppard, stand-in. He was whisked out of Austria shortly after he was born. His mother married an English journalist. Eventually, well, in the play, it's an English journalist, but she did marry somebody English, and eventually they ended up in England. He took his stepfather's name. He was actually adopted, raised as a true English gentleman in a way, and was never told that he had any Jewish blood. And it came out very accidentally when he went to make an appearance somewhere, and one of his cousins, who had great knowledge of the family tree and was tracking this, saw the announcement and confronted him in a way and said, you know, don't you know who you are? And this is the conclusion of the play, and it's heart stopping. And again, great cast. And that last scene is anchored by Brandon Uranowitz, who I think there is no doubt in my mind will win Best Featured Actor in a Tony.
It's not only heart stopping; it's heart stoppered.
It is heart stoppered.
Thank you. One more. Give us one more show that you.
Well, I think, and the other really best play I saw, unfortunately, isn't playing anymore. It was an off-Broadway production of Bruce Norris's Downstate, which is an incredibly difficult, admittedly, play about sex offenders and how we treat them in society. But it won the New York Drama Critics Circle Award for Best Play, actually beating Leopoldstadt, which won Best Foreign Play. It is an organization that I think is the best of the best. I am a member, although I do not vote. And it was just directed by Pam McKinnon, an incredible production, perhaps in a different climate. We would have moved it to Broadway, but I wouldn't be the producer trying to sell this to a mass audience. So I'm very understanding of the fact that, yeah, maybe that wasn't an easy decision, but I'm very blessed to have seen it.
Well, what they need to do is just turn it into a musical, like "Perv!" exclamation.
Yeah, not a good idea.
Because Andrew Lloyd Webber hasn't had,
But as we've proven, anything can be a musical. I mean, that sort of goes to the fact to another of this year's highlights, which of course is the revival of Sweeney Todd. And, you know, if you think about it, the story of a murderous barber who turns his victims into food for meat pies wouldn't exactly sing in most people's hands. But it certainly sings in Stephen Sondheim's hands, and it certainly sings under the voices of Josh Groban and Annalee Ashford, who are giving extraordinary performances.
So
as I said to Annalee the other night, I've literally seen, I don't know what this says about me, but I counted, I've actually seen 11 productions of Sweeney in my lifetime, both the original, starting with the original, and that's both stage and film to tape. But I have literally seen 11 performances and 11 different people do it. And it's remarkable how every single actor manages to find something different and to make each of those two pivotal parts their own. In Annalee's case, she may be the funniest Mrs. Lovett you'll ever see. She is a brilliant comic actress, and they really let her gifts go wild there. But she also gets to the heart of it, and she makes a really believable woman who's trying to create a family that she either never had or briefly had. Sometimes people are, fans get crazy, and so a lot of people argue about the background of Sweeney and,
What?
She's actually in real life younger than Josh. Angela Lansbury was actually considerably older than Len Cariou, and most people think of Mrs. Lovett as a character who's much older than Sweeney Todd. But I actually read the script for this again, and they can be the same age, it doesn't really matter. And so I think here her sort of lust for Sweeney Todd and her desire to really create a family with him is totally legitimate.
Oh, cool. Yeah. All right. We're talking, by the way, with Brian Scott Lipton, whom you can read in citytour.com. And is it C-I-T?
ITOUR.com.
CITITOUR.com. Plus, he writes also still for Theater Mania. He'll write for Connecticut. What was it?
Connecticut Voice. It's a quarterly magazine.
Connecticut Voice and Theater Pizzazz has some of his articles as
Yes.
well. So, what are you? My last question for you, Brian. What are you looking for or forward to in the upcoming season? Is there anything on your radar like, "Ooh, that sounds good"?
Well, honestly, Dave, we haven't been told too much about the upcoming season. For whatever reason, we have fewer, I think, announcements coming up. And we have a summer season. I mean, we actually have 8 openings on Broadway this summer,
Right.
which I think is a record in the 35 years I've done this. So 2 things I will say. Obviously, one has to feel some excitement over the musical Back to the Future, because if you're a certain age, like me, you're going to have a certain amount of nostalgia for that great film with Michael J. Fox. And this is supposed to be technologically one of the most superior things to ever arrive on Broadway. I believe it's got about a $25 million capitalization. I know it's a lot of money and
It's not Spider-Man.
they're charging a lot of money. So that should be fun. And I'm certainly excited about getting what, in my case, luckily gets to be the 3rd chance, going back to Sondheim. Yes, I am a Sondheim freak, of seeing Merrily We Roll Along, the new revival directed by Maria Friedman and starring the amazing Jonathan Groff, Lindsay Mendez, and Daniel Radcliffe. Not to give Mr. Radcliffe 3rd billing, but that's kind of what I got. They are extraordinary. I was lucky enough to see this production twice at New York Theater Workshop last fall. It's a show that I always said, great score, terrible book. It will never work. It will never move me. And for the first time, it really did.
Wow.
Partially, I mean, their talents have a lot to do with it. I think Maria's concept. It feels so much more human and in the right scale. It'll be a very tough ticket. It's a limited run at the Hudson Theater, I think 16 weeks. And the prices will be very expensive. It's something we should talk about. I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but Broadway has gotten insanely expensive. I don't deny that. I'm very lucky with what I do. And I'm very careful then to say, you should go spend your money. But I think if you love these performers, if you love Sondheim, spend money.
Well, I haven't looked at a Broadway box. When I've gone into the theater, it's been a few months for me now.
$200-300 is the norm.
How much?
$200 to $300 a ticket is the norm.
I'm sorry, that's just nuts.
From the box office. And so obviously when people ask, I think about that very closely.
How much?
And one thing I would say, you only have a few weeks left. If you have the money, I always say, if you have the money, it is only theater. Spend it if you can to see Jodie Comer in Prima Facie, who is my pick for Best Actress in a play for tomorrow night, and whose performance may be one of the single, if not the single most extraordinary thing I've ever seen in 35 years.
Oh,
just
and it's a legal thing. It's about what?
The 90-minute play in which she plays a lawyer who first defends victims of sexual assault, and then the tables turn when she herself becomes a victim of sexual assault.
She defends the victims of sexual, or she defends the perpetrators?
I'm sorry, she defends the assaulters, I guess.
Right, yeah.
I want to call them that.
Well, the accused, and then
she is the defense attorney, and then of course her feelings change when she becomes a victim. It's a play by Susie Miller. It has a lot to say. She's a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. Jodie plays a lawyer. I think it has a lot to say about the legal system, although it's the British legal system. But Jodie's performance, just physically, technically, in every sense, is really, what the word tour de force were created for. And considering it is her first play ever that she's ever done. She did it in London, so we are not getting the first iteration. But she has no formal stage training. She has never done a play before Prima Facie. And my mouth was just left agape at the end of this.
It's like
tickets are very scarce, so I tell people, and I think you get a lot more probably from being up close. So if you can afford it, it's only here through the mid-July, take a chance on it. I think you won't be disappointed. There's so much to talk about. But there are a lot of tough races tomorrow. Jessica Chastain could easily take the crown from her. Her work in A Doll's House was great. And she's certainly been campaigning in a way for it. I don't think we have a lot of sure things tomorrow night. I've never felt sort of less secure in a ballot that I've made. I mean, I'm both a Tony voter and a pretty well-known Tony predictor. You can find those if you like on goldderby.com. I am sort of the reigning champion. Well, I may not have won last. No, I did win last year. I've never felt less secure in what I've chosen because everything is so close.
Wow.
So much good stuff and so many. I have to say it's very apples and oranges this year. I said to one of the nominees who I saw this week that
so many things that, you know, how can you compare this to this?
Yeah, I think we're being asked to compare people, plays, musicals, whatever, that just do very different things. And so I do want to stress that no matter who I voted for or who I've predicted for, I really more than ever dislike having to use the term the best. You were all in so many categories, you were all the best. The 5 best actor in a play categories, I promise you, Sean Hay, Stephen McKinley Henderson, Corey Hawkins, Yal Abdin Mattoon, you are all the best. Having to say one of you is the best of the best, that's really hard.
Well, Brian, you are one of the best. We've got to let you go.
Thank
You will have given us a city tour de force. Brian Scott Lipton, enjoy the Tonys tomorrow. Thank you so much for being
I will be enjoying them from the comfort of my home, as I imagine you will. We hope everything goes well. The United Palace Theater in Washington Heights, it's the first time that venue is being used for these awards. But yeah, I'm not going up there.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But thank you again, Brian.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, man.
Bye.
We are here